The hardest thing I always say is launching a podcast. The second hardest thing is growing the podcast, building that community and attracting more people to it, which is all about, the ongoing marketing on a weekly basis, be that through email, social media. I'd always just had this itch that I needed to scratch, which was that I wanted to work for myself. Piers, good to be here.
And by the way, Alex is a podcast professional, so he can talk the hind leg off a donkey. You can see his podcast. What is it? Screw It, Just Do It.
Yeah.
Number one.
It's been number one in the UK for entrepreneurship. 10 countries last year it was number one. Top 10 in 70 others. I'd always just had this itch that I needed to scratch, which was that I wanted to work for myself. And whether that was a result of being inspired by being around someone like Richard Branson, because back in the day we used to actually see him quite a lot.
Well, I remember. So we talked about this. So my ex-girlfriend, quite a long time ago, worked for Virgin as well. And this was the time where he used to have a party in his garden in Oxford.
Yeah,
and he'd be going around a quad bike with a bucket on the back of it with some wine and a cooler. And it was that big, wasn't it? You kind of knew, not everybody, but it was a size where you could have a party and invite the whole company.
Literally. And I always remember, and at that time, that you could take someone with you. So I took my brother, and I always just remember him telling me the story afterwards that he wandered into the house, Richard's house.
You could go into his kitchen and open his fridge.
He was there, and he'd put the TV on to watch the boxing, and I think it was Frank Bruno again, and having a fight. And he said this lady asked him if she could make him a sandwich, and then he said this guy came in with a beard and said, "You're fine to carry on watching TV, but just switch the light off on your way out." And I was just like, "That was Richard, you idiot." And that was his wife making you a sandwich.
How things have changed. Yeah.
Indeed. Now living on a private island.
Well, yeah. So you didn't need probably can't fly anywhere now. Anyway, that's the thing. So how did you get from that to Virgin Startup, which actually was one of the delivery partners, it's called, of a startup loans company, which is now part of British Business Bank, where I was actually a director, but that wasn't when you were there, was it?
No. But that's how it's transpired since. But look, I'd always wanted to start my own business, and I had various ideas, and I kind of knew that the time was right to leave, because instead of going out and partying, which was kind of like standard for every trip back then, or doing a bit of sightseeing, I was staying in my room and just researching different business ideas, everything from importing, exporting furniture through to opening kids play areas, all sorts of different ideas that I had. And I was just in my room researching stuff online, and then the opportunity came up through the last recession, where I met my girlfriend, wife, now mother of my kids, on a flight. She was a beauty therapist in upper class. I met her on a flight to LA.
Nobody remembers that, do they? So you used to have the white outfit.
That's right.
And you get a massage and a facial on the plane.
Yeah.
Oh, that's gone as well.
It's gone as well, because they worked out in the recession they could still run an airline without needing to give the passengers a massage or a manicure. So they made like all 300 beauty therapists redundant, formally redundant, and then they opened up voluntary redundancy to everybody else. And I waited about a year to 18 months till the offer was too good to turn down, because I'd always said I was going to leave Virgin Atlantic, and they made me the offer, and it was like a year's salary plus 2 years of free flights. And I was like, if I'm ever going to go, now's the time to take it. So I took voluntary redundancy and started my first business, which was in the health and fitness space, and then we're probably on to iteration 3 or 4 now.
Which tends to be, people, again, I always say this quite a lot, that's how it tends to go. It's not the first business often that makes you, or the one that really has longevity. It's usually the second or third, or in my case, it can be the fourth or fifth, it depends. But people, you learn as you go along.
Absolutely.
Anyway, keep going though.
Yeah, well, you hope you learn, don't you? So I literally went through a few iterations, which I got reeled back into the Virgin Group, as you kind of alluded to earlier, and that was through mentoring. Originally started out when I was in a health and fitness space, so started out retraining as a personal trainer, and then specialising in sports injury, and that led to me opening a bunch of sports injury clinics down in Bournemouth and Poole, one in Bournemouth, one in Sandbanks in Poole that a lot of people probably would have heard of, and ultimately I got invited to be a mentor for YMCA, going into the schools and the kids pitching their business ideas, and that just seemed to get me. I absolutely loved that. And then just by some quirk of fate, I then was scrolling through social media. I'm sure it was Facebook back at that time, and I saw a post by a company called Virgin Startup looking for mentors, and I thought, who the hell are Virgin Startup? I've never heard of Virgin Startup. Fast forwards, and I was at the headquarters at the Battleship Building in Paddington in London, and got invited to be a mentor. That led to me being invited to be a part-time business advisor, then full-time business advisor, and then delivery partner for Virgin Startup, which, as you say, was one of the delivery partners for Startup Loans. So I was literally helping people from somebody who might have a bricks and mortar business like a beauty salon through to somebody who was launching an online toy business and helping them get a government approved loan.
Because Startup Loans, if you don't know about Startup Loans as well, is that they help you, don't they? Put a business plan together as well. They don't just sort of say, here's, and the average is £7,000. It's a personal loan, actually.
Correct.
But it's definitely something, if you're looking at trying to raise finance, people like yourself, when you were there, you actually got them in and helped them put a plan together. They don't just say, here's the money, off you go.
No, it was literally, work through the business plan, work through your financial projections, put forward, as you say, and we had quite a few of those, up to 4 people, looking to get £25,000 each to get 100 grand to launch a business. But the average, as you say, was more like £7,000-8,000.
Yeah, it's about £7.
Kind of grew.
Last time I looked at it was £7. Yeah.
And one of the biggest benefits was that successful applicants to the loan would get offered the opportunity to have a mentor. And we were then getting so many people who just wanted a mentor, didn't need the money, so they were applying for the minimum, like £500 just to access.
Oh, really? Just the value of the mentors.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. We had quite a few people on the business as usual who entrepreneurs that they mentor. Well, actually, in one case, one of the directors of Mobile's actually Fran. She's got a business mentoring.
Yeah, Fran Borman.
Yeah, so it's Fran, you know Fran as well. So she's got a company actually that does mentoring actually.
So is that the goal? Is that the goal business?
Yeah, I think Goal 17.
That's it.
Goal 17.
Yeah.
I'm careful, I don't get that wrong. Oh dear, I should be around here. Fast forward then. So how do you go from that to starting Podpreneur, or it wasn't called that originally, was it?
No, it was the name of my podcast.
How did you get into podcasting?
Yeah, so that was literally a case of, I started listening to a podcast called How I Built This by a production company called NPR in America, and every week it was the story of somebody who built an empire, be that somebody like Airbnb or Patagonia. And at the time I just thought I love these stories, but after a while it's like, okay, so everybody you're interviewing is like a billionaire who retired 30 years ago, and a lot of those lessons are timeless, but equally a lot of those lessons, there wasn't an internet, there wasn't social media. I was just like, I would love to do something like this, not necessarily better, but different. I interview people who were still in the trenches, and my immediate thought was interview those businesses that were helping at Virgin Startup. So the idea was to launch a podcast for Virgin Startup. But again, having my own business now, you forget how long these organisations take to do anything. And it took them like 100 days to give me approval on the idea. And there's like 24 people had to approve.
Yeah, corporates.
It was unbelievable. So in the end, I literally decided to, and it was on a Friday, and they were like, Virgin Startup have approved the podcast idea. And I'd done like 4 interviews, I think, to start with. And then it was a case, right, this is now going to virgin.com. Then it's going to Virgin PR, then it's the director of the Virgin Group. And it was just like, do you know what? Screw it, just do it. I'm just going to launch it myself. And I've never regretted doing that. At the time, I thought it'd be great to have the Virgin name.
I remember talking, because obviously I talked to Virgin Startup. And I said, oh, Alex, screw it, just do it. It's actually the name Richard Branson's book. They didn't look too happy about the fact you were using screw it, just do it. But I doubt you could trademark that.
I had to get rid of it, and it was in red as well. So I had to get rid of the red.
So that's green. It made me laugh at that, actually. So did you have a plan then? So, right, I'm going to start a podcast empire. Or was it the usual story of it was sort of piece by piece? Yeah, the kind of opportunity kind of opened up as you went along.
It literally did. It was, again, people, mutual friends of ours who were launching an event, and somebody introduced me to them and said, okay, they're launching a business event at the NEC in Birmingham. I think it would be a really good idea for them to, as part of their marketing, something that we'll talk about later, I'm sure, but part of the marketing mix is to have a podcast and to interview those speakers that they're going to have to kind of lead up to that event and kind of drip feed that content into the audience. And having done that, I decided there was an opportunity here, because if there's one person wanted to do that, there were going to be more. And it was more a case of, once I'd launched that, and told people via social media and my existing email list that I had, even though that was for a different industry, that people were approaching me to ask me about making a podcast for them. And we had everybody literally in a really small time scale, from like the biggest zoo in Western Europe to the biggest supplier of shared office space in Europe, and kind of everybody in between.
They were looking for somebody, they saw audio podcast, we need to do one.
Yeah.
And they were looking for someone that could actually work with them, and then bang, there you were. So the timing was right. So let's go through a couple of things. One is, go through your process then, because we've been working with Greenrock, another one of our partners, on putting this together as well as your good self for our podcast as well.
Yeah.
So we try and work with small businesses who are suppliers, but the Simon, who's the founder of Greenrock, he sat me down. I said, we're going to do some podcasts, we'll do a bit of YouTube, and he was kind of like, no, hang on a minute, you need strategy, design, creative. Then you need to produce it.
Yeah.
We've got the team over here helping us produce it. Caroline and Ed. You've got the team to produce it and edit it, and then you've got to distribute it and then market it. So
exactly,
you make podcasts, obviously, but obviously your podcast is a tool for marketing your business. So let's just talk through that process and how you approach it and how you would apply that as a small business. Then after, let's talk about the sort of the future of audio.
Yeah, so you're right with exactly that kind of timeline with regards to the process, and it's trying to drill down to start with. Ultimately, what is the end goal of this podcast? Because what I found was a lot of people, which is fine, we'll still work with those people, but it is like a tick boxing exercise. I.e., we've heard podcasts are the latest thing. We clearly need.
That's like me. I want to build an app. An app to do what? Don't know yet. It's like, an app.
Yeah. So it's just trying to, that initial strategy piece as to, what is the ultimate goal that you want to achieve from launching this podcast. And then now more of a conversation is around bringing the video element into that podcast as well. And then the other element is the live element, because there's this huge proliferation of social audio apps as well as the obvious things like Instagram lives and LinkedIn lives, etc. So it's getting super clear on that strategy, getting super clear on who that ideal listener is going to be. What actions do you want that listener to do? What are they doing when they're listening to your podcast? And that will determine things like how long is your podcast going to be and the subject matter. But it's just getting super clear on that for the strategy, because then you can work through the actual design and coming up with the cover art for your podcast, the music that's going to come with it, before you then kind of go down into the nuts and bolts of what equipment you're going to need to record your first interview.
We'll come back to that.
You will come back to that. And then onto things like you said, hosting that podcast so it can actually live somewhere that people can listen to it, distributing it to all these different channels from Spotify to Apple. And then it is, like you say, the hardest thing I always say is launching a podcast. The second hardest thing is growing the podcast, building that community and attracting more people to it, which is all about, the ongoing marketing on a weekly basis, be that through, email, social media, etc.
So it's already though. So some people will think, oh, that's quite interesting. I'll go ring up Alex and pay him. But the other people that just can't afford that, but they still want to create a podcast, even if it's something they do understand their customer. It might be a very niche one, and it doesn't cost in to actually put all that production expense into it. So if you're in that situation, what's your advice in terms of how would you go about it? And distribution as well, because something I didn't fully understand. I've done a few podcasts even for some big banks. Yeah. I didn't understand it either. So what are the top tips if you don't really have a budget?
Yeah, well, do you know what? I remember interviewing somebody called Maria Hatzistefanis from Rodial, which is like $100 million beauty company. And we just started geeking out on podcasting because she's got her own podcast, and she literally used to take, one of these around the world with her, and she'd be interviewing people like one of the Kardashians, Kylie Jenner, was fronting her campaign for one of her beauty products. So she'd be interviewing Kylie Jenner's makeup artist, and she'd literally have my phone, an app on my phone that was free from the App Store with a clip-on mic for each of you, with a one of those splitters that you can plug two of them in, plug it into your phone. And again, I would say for most people, that's not ideal to start like that, because the sound quality isn't the best. But at the end of the day, if that's just going to be another barrier for you to starting a podcast, and don't let it be a barrier. You could literally start, as I say, with the phone that you already own with the free apps that come with it, and you might spend £15 on a clip-on mic from Amazon if you want to get started.
And then if you've got any budget, what you can then do, we'll come on to distribution in a minute, what you can then do, if you can find someone even on Fiverr or one of the sort of freelancer websites, is get someone to understand to use, an audio editing tool, and you'd be amazed what they can turn some pretty poor quality audio into.
Yeah, absolutely. And, see quite a lot of people that we work with who then have somebody in-house that can learn how to do that. But yeah, to start with, you can literally go on, like you say, freelancer.com or fiverr.com and pay somebody in another part of the world to edit something for you.
I'm mainly retentive, as you know. So I learned in Premiere Pro to do some video editing, but I didn't have the time. And I started learning Audition, which is another Adobe product.
Yeah, that's what I started on.
Yeah, and even things like where if you've got background noise, you can record the background noise and then basically take it out.
Yeah.
It's amazingly powerful things. So what about distribution? So you made your podcast now on your phone with your two, they're called lav mics, two little mics journalists wear. Then what? How do you get people to listen to it?
So like a website, it needs to live somewhere. So you literally upload your content to a hosting platform.
And that costs something.
Yeah, and it's like the Adobe Audition that you said, to have that on a monthly basis is literally something like £20 a month. Likewise, the hosting platform is like £20-25 a month. There is a free one that, funnily enough, Spotify now own called Anchor, and you can actually, which is a great tool to start with.
That. Yeah, just acquired two more, haven't they, as well?
They have, yeah.
Spotify's going big into podcasts, yeah.
They've just bought the biggest analytics company. I'm actually just liaising with the Spotify media department to get an interview with these two guys who, I don't know how many millions they've got from Spotify, but it's like the biggest analytics platform. But yeah, you would find somewhere to host it so it can live somewhere, and then you would literally just hook up the different distribution channels. So, you want your podcast to be heard absolutely everywhere that people listen to podcasts. So be that now these days through, Amazon Music, Audible, Google, Spotify, Apple, and a gazillion other platforms that people want to, and apps that people listen to podcasts on. So it's just,
So already, if you're not technical though, you're probably going to need a bit of help to do that kind of stuff.
It's not the hardest thing in the world, but I'm obviously going to say that. But it's like once you've done it once, you can teach anybody.
There's always a YouTube video telling you how to do it.
Yeah, there's going to be a gazillion of that.
So you've recorded it however you have recorded it. You've got your platform in terms of distribution. Let's talk about marketing it then. So how do you go about it? And I know I talk a lot about content market fit. So one thing, to talk to the audience. So one thing on Moblocks that I always talk about is product market fit. Your product, your market, understand your customer, iterate your marketing so you get it just right. Same with content is that, we're going to try this today with Alex, and we're going to try, we're talking about Cotswold Wares wallet. And we're going to put things on shelves. We're going to try different sort of segments and see what works. We're going to do competitions. And eventually we're going to ask you, that's the key to it actually, ask your target customers what works for you. We're going to ask you what's working. And based on that, we'll improve our content. So over time, that's the other thing, is look at the data, look at the feedback, and you'll find from that feedback, you'll find this content market fit, which will help you sell more. But how do you go about marketing it then? So, which is different to just having it on, it's like in a website, there's SEO, there's paid ads.
Yeah.
What's equivalent in audio?
Yeah, so it's not dissimilar to what you said before with regards to, testing and testing again. So what we would do is, as part of the process, as part of an agency, is create a bunch of different assets that you can share across whatever platforms your audience are consuming.
So social's an obvious one.
Social's an obvious one, be that through, any of the social media platforms that are out there. You literally create, graph. And what I'm talking about is you could have a static image, you could have a quote from the episode that you had, and you could put that against a picture. You could have an audiogram, which is some of the audio against a set of images with subtitles and radio wave going through it.
Radio wave.
Yeah, and if you are videoing that podcast as well, like we're doing today, then you can get video clips, you can get audio clips, you can get static artwork again. It's just finding, what resonates most with your audience. And again, you're only going to get that with, launching your podcast, trying different types of graphic assets on all of those different media platforms, email as well, and then doubling down on, what worked, getting rid of what doesn't work, looking at what other people in your space are using on social media, and not copying that, but modeling it for your audience. And again, something you just mentioned a minute ago, look at the data. So after a little while, you'll be able to see different metrics, and it will show you when your audience is dropping off. So
or when to publish it as well, when they're listening.
Yeah, exactly. The ideal time to publish it, and again, at what point is your audience dropping off? So if your show is an hour long and your audience is, which has happened with a client, the audience is dropping off after 30, 35 minutes, you're kind of wasting your time by putting an hour's worth of content. You either split that into 2 episodes, or you get a bit more focused and put out a 30-minute episode instead. So it's looking at the data, it's testing stuff over time, and it's also leveraging the guests that you have on the show, getting them,
and that's quite hard work. So you're here today, and we've had a couple of people testing out what we're doing here, because we know you. But when you start getting into, and there's people have podcast agencies, as we know, and getting a guest, getting them in, making sure they turn up, doing the research, that can be a job in itself, actually.
It is a job in itself, exactly. So, I mean, I do think, and I always say, I think you can, if you are, solopreneur, and you want to put a podcast out there, you want to engage with your audience via audio, i.e. your audience listens to podcasts, therefore why wouldn't you want to communicate to them via the medium audio? You can get away with spending an hour researching a guest, an hour conducting the interview, and then a couple of hours a week marketing that. But it is one of those things, like, how long is a piece of string? Because you could
but then the secret is any content, which I've tried YouTube, which is hard work as well.
Yeah,
is consistency. It is the
biggest thing.
Everyone you see these YouTube massive YouTube channel. You look at it, you think, flipping out. How have they done that? And you go and look at the videos, and they started 11 years ago.
Yeah,
and they've been putting up 2-3 videos a week for 11 years.
Yeah, and
that is what it takes.
And then you will get that tipping point, and it's the same with podcasts. And I think one of the most commonly held views is that podcasts are saturated like YouTube is, but that's definitely not the case.
You can say that about radio, you can say that about TV, you can say that about the internet.
Exactly.
It's a question of finding a voice and finding your audience and connecting the dots.
It is, isn't it? And it's literally, if you say you're going to put a new episode out every week at 6 p.m. on a Sunday, you need to deliver that at that time on that day on a weekly basis, because as soon as you don't, your audience will be the first to let you know about it.
Yeah, they'll go somewhere else.
And then they'll go somewhere else, yeah.
So one thing Alex and I spent the last 2 years, a lot of people did actually, is on these audio apps. So you'd be aware of things like Clubhouse. That was the big one, which kind of went from 0 to becoming huge. I think it's gone more or less back to 0 again now. But it's quite interesting about the power of these things in terms of bringing people together and what people thought they would go. I think people have a lot of time in their hands. So Alex, what's your view on those apps, but also just the future of audio generally? That's a big question, I know. But
it's a really big question. Yeah, and I think, remember, at the time it went from, I can't remember what the valuation, but up to like a 4 billion valuation for Clubhouse, probably this time last year. And I think it's definitely the fact that people were at home and they couldn't leave their houses due to lockdown, so people were searching for that connection, and I think it was just the perfect wave for that thing at that time. But there had been, the years leading up to that, a lot of talk in the audio industry saying, where is the next social media platform going to come from? Is it going to come from audio? Because how can the hosts of a podcast communicate, engage with their audience more effectively? So it kind of brought this live.
Kind of still makes sense.
It totally makes
Twitter
totally makes sense.
You've got
yeah.
What's it call it? Who else has got one?
You got Facebook
call-in
audio,
now, Facebook audio.
You got Fireside, which was the what's the name? Mark Cuban. Spotify's Green Room, and there's more and more coming out, by the minute. So I think it still works, and I just wonder whether it will be a case of every social media platform will just have an audio aspect to it.
We tried calling apps. This is one of the founders of Spotify, and then the All In podcast in the US. He's one of the guys on there actually. David Sachs.
Oh,
anyway,
okay,
call-ins where you can have like a conversation and it turns it into a podcast. But no one's really, from what I can see anyway, no one's really cracked it.
No.
Why is that? Why? Because audio to me makes sense, because I don't have to watch. I can be driving, I can do anything and do whatever I'm doing. Not that I am much, quite frankly, these days. But Why do you think none of them have quite cracked it?
I think it's you've literally had Clubhouse and nobody else, and now LinkedIn are bringing out their own.
That'll be an interesting one.
Which should be an interesting one. I've got there's 200 people beta testing it worldwide, and by strange coincidence, one of our clients is one of them, Robert Hanna, who I'll give a shout out to. But he was saying it's way behind where Clubhouse is, and he doesn't see it coming out anytime soon. But I think it's a case of, you had one with Clubhouse, now you've got maybe 7 or 8. So I think maybe that initial interest that was in Clubhouse has now dissipated across a whole range of different platforms. And, the likes of LinkedIn are trying to catch up to where Clubhouse is. And you think how easy it would be for someone who already uses LinkedIn as maybe a networking tool or recruitment tool to go and listen to a live audio stream on there, rather than having to go to the App Store, download something. And I think we've all clearly gotten busier. People's businesses, lives have picked up. So I think the amount of time that people can spend on those apps is dissipated as well. But hopefully over time, I still think there's a massive opportunity there for somebody to own that space. I mean, who it'll be, it's probably the same as when MySpace came out as the first social media platform.
You're showing your age now.
I am showing my age.
So what do you? We're trying to keep these short as well. So I can talk to you for hours about this, and we probably will continue talking. But so what are if you had to sort of sum up them, and we've touched upon quite a few of them. What are the top tips then? So you're a small business, you understand these podcasts, you've seen them, you listen to them. What are the top tips to actually get out there and at least try it?
I think, like anything, the hardest thing is just starting.
Just doing it.
Just literally, start now, get perfect later, that kind of mentality. So, if it's I I had somebody who emailed me or directly messaged me and said, we'd love to know your advice. Launching a podcast, we've recorded 34 practice episodes. I've got another 20 in the pipeline. I went, can I just stop you there?
Wow, that's a year's worth of content.
Exactly. I said, forget recording any more episodes. Just get it out there, get it out there. And whether that's a case of, yourself and a friend or a couple of friends jumping on a Zoom call and recording that conversation about you talking passionately about whatever you're interested in, I don't know, football, small businesses, whatever it might be. But just recording that and ultimately, enjoying that experience. If you enjoy it, you've got the recorded content. Now just get it out to the world, put it on a hosting platform, get it live. And don't overthink it. Like most people, they want to work on getting it 100% perfect. There is no perfect.
Especially if you're talking about something that's specific, or you have a deep understanding of, or is very particular to your niche audience, your customer base, because it's about communicating and adding value, isn't it? And I think the only thing I say about audio is your sound quality's got to be reasonable.
Yeah.
The human brain will take a dodgy looking picture in. If audio is bad, it just switches off.
If it's bad, yeah, absolutely. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be half decent. And I think, it's absolutely a case of, getting something out there, iterating it till you ultimately improve it. It's about providing value. If you're passionate about something and you've got some degree of knowledge or expertise about something, well, where that sweet spot is, then that should be something that you should be looking to talk about, and be that in audio form, be that in video form, be that in a written form. And
you're starting a video podcast now. I can tell because you keep looking into the camera.
I'm copying your lead, and I'm taking that, and I'm looking over there. But more and more of them, and that's definitely been something from the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months.
It's like with me with this. So I think if I'm talking into the camera at you about what we're doing, that's one thing. If someone starts talking to you, it feels like a video podcast.
It does.
It's quite interesting how it's kind of merging together almost, because you could listen to this conversation in audio only. You might miss the websites, we've been looking at things like that, but you get the gist of it because we're explaining what you're out there. Well, I'm going to wrap this one up. So thank you for coming in. Alex, it's really interesting. I think we might have to do a proper podcast. You need to get back on your podcast, actually.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thanks for watching this episode of Screw It, Just Do It. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below this video. Has this episode helped move you closer to where you want to be? All that I ask is that if you enjoyed this episode and then it's moved you closer to getting to where you want to be, that you share this episode so that it helps one other person do just the same. Just ask yourself, what small action will move you forward to get you from where you are, then screw it and just do it. Until next time.